Creepy things happen before the grave.
The Screaming Man Lives With Us by BryanY97. Last year, I moved into my dream house with my fiance. We'd been planning this move for years, and after a lot of saving, in addition to landing our dream jobs in the same city, we were excited to take the next step and put a down payment on a house. When we first toured the place, it was everything we had ever wanted. It was spacious, had all the modern amenities, had a pool, and it contained a large basement I could convert into an amazing game room, on top of being within our price range. The only real concern I had was how many other buyers were looking at the home. We were told that there was a few other couples who were considering purchasing the place. In a short conference with my fiance, I told the real estate agent that she might as well tell them that the home wasn't for auction because we were taking it. As soon as we got some people in there to make sure that everything was up to code, we said that we would gladly buy the house. Soon after, we had an inspection done and I talked to one of the guys about their findings. Just as I had hoped, everything was up to snuff. The only thing of note was that on the first floor, there seemed to be a small door towards the back of the house that appeared to be sealed up and painted over. He theorized that it could have just been an extra guest room that the previous owner thought looked out of place or attracted pests, so they must have decided to seal it away. At first, I was surprised that I hadn't noticed the extra room, and I had a fleeting thought of why the real estate agent hadn't told us about it. I came to the conclusion that maybe she had simply forgotten about the room, and when I asked if I wanted them to open the room and inspect it, I declined. I figured it was harmless, and if anything, having an extra room was a good thing. If there were pests inside, I could easily deal with them after the fact, but having to go through another inspection wasn't worth the time or money if they found something. I was sure that whatever they would have found wasn't something a few bug bombs couldn't fix if it really did become a problem. Later, we completed all the necessary paperwork, and after a month, we had completely moved in. Things were fantastic for the first few months. Honestly, living here together was everything we had ever dreamed of. However, not long after we moved in, we started to notice a very distinct smell coming from somewhere in the house. Not being able to pinpoint where it was coming from, we did a complete scrub down of our home and bought air fresheners for every room. This worked for the most part. There were still moments where we could catch whiffs of whatever the hell it was, but it was mostly covered up. However, as time grew on, we began to hear soft banging and what sounded like whimpering. I remember more than a few nights where I couldn't sleep, and hearing these sounds prompted me to search my house with my trusty aluminum bat and find nothing. As the weeks passed, these strange occurrences only seemed to intensify to the point where we were losing sleep because of them. Less sleep caused us to get grumpy and agitated more often, spurring on arguments more and more frequently. I'd snap at my fiance about leaving food out because of the smell, and she'd yell at me about getting security cameras because of the noises. I couldn't take it. I loved my fiance, and there was no way in hell our dream house was what's going to tear us apart. One weekend, I decided to search every square inch of that house for whatever it was that was responsible for these strange occurrences. Motivated by the return to my peaceful life, I looked at every possible place that something could be out of order, tearing it up, and then fixing it again better than I had left it. If I'm being honest, it was probably the most thorough I've been with anything in my life. Unfortunately, after finding nothing, I was at my wit's end. Where the hell could this be coming from? Then it hit me. This sealed up room must be the origin. I stomped outside to the garage to retrieve my tools, and then angrily approached the sealed up door, ready to tear it open and expose whatever it was that was causing us so much stress. I easily broke into the sealant, revealing a small door that looked as though it couldn't be hiding anything too conspicuous. Ready to rid this nuisance from my life for good, I flicked the small latch that had taken the place of a doorknob and bursted my way through the room. Immediately, the smell of death hit me. This was definitely the place. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it at the ground. To my horror, I saw what looked like to be dozens of dead rodents, many of them with their limbs bitten off. Some didn't even seem to be consumed, so much as their bodies were mangled and eviscerated. I gasped at all the death. My first thought was that there had to be some large animal in here that was doing this. I took a step forward into the darkness, plugging my nose as I went. I shined my light to the back of the room. I immediately jumped back to the safety of the door. Sitting in the fetal position was a meek-looking man. He was completely hairless, save for a few long strands of hair protruding from his head. He had a severe underbite, and his jaw appeared to be broken. His skin was extremely pale, with warts, bumps, and bruises covering his entire body. He looked to be malnourished, with almost no muscle or fat. I wanted to ask what had happened and why he was in our house, but as I began to work up the courage, he began to shriek like no human I've ever heard before. His voice was more akin to a siren than that of a normal man's scream. I wondered how he had the energy to do such a thing given his state. His mouth appeared to unhinge, and he flopped out a ridiculously long tongue as his grayish eyes rolled into the back of his head. Immediately, I rushed out of the room and locked the door behind me. My fiancé came running down the stairs, asking me what the hell was going on, but all I could think to do was tell her to call the police. They arrived shortly after, and after rushing them to the room, they swiftly made their way in with guns and flashlights at the ready. I could hear their very audible noises of disgust when they saw the dead rodents, and from what I remember, one of the officers nearly threw up from the stench. But the most concerning aspect of their visit was that they saw no man. All they found were the rodents, feces, and some other unidentifiable stains. But outside of a disgusting guest room, everything seemed to be normal. The officer that had almost lost his lunch suggested that an animal had gotten in and had been living there without our knowledge, and that the shock and fear of seeing all this carnage must have made me see something that wasn't there. I pleaded my case, saying this was not a figure of my imagination, and that they had to do something about the man. But from what they had to go on, there was no arrest to be made. They gave us a number of a local cleaning service before promptly getting into their car and driving away, leaving my fiancé and I to deal with whatever it was by ourselves. She sat me down and asked if I thought what I had seen was real. I assured her in that moment, in the most serious tone I could muster, that what I saw wasn't a figment of my imagination, and it was that thing that made the sound. I also told her that even though it was humanoid in figure, I knew that it was different, and that we had to get rid of it as soon as possible. She simply nodded and asked what the plan was. I thought for a second before going up to our room and grabbing the bat. Feeling as though I could scare it away, I decided to give our encounter another try. I went back to the room carrying my bat with a much more fiery attitude, but before I even got the chance to put on my badass act, it again screamed so loud that I dropped the bat and I was forced to retreat, ensuring to lock the door behind me. I stumbled out of the room in a daze. My fiancée ran over to me and her eyes began to water as she saw blood dripping from my ears. She rushed me to the hospital, and it was discovered that I had a burst eardrum. Though I was supposed to be on bed rest for the next 8 weeks, I wanted this thing out. I tried various tactics to kill it or get it out. I'd throw in bug bombs, put laced food out for it to eat, tried using a smoker, etc. Unfortunately, nothing worked. For the next month or so, our house became a prison. As I began to heal, We used every opportunity we could to get out of the house or stay somewhere else. Even though it had never even tried to leave the room, it just didn't feel safe to be in the same general vicinity as it. Hell, even our sex life suffered. Neither of us felt comfortable doing anything in the same house that thing existed in. For all we knew, it was lurking somewhere in the darkness, watching our every move. Some nights we'd hear it wailing. There were more than a few occasions where we'd get angry knocks on the door from our neighbors, telling us to shut up. All we could do was apologize and make up some fake story of anguish. Eventually, we tried to get other people to see it too. Maybe someone else would know what it was or would have an idea what to do. We'd call in cleaning services, call in inspectors, hell, even invited our friends over and tried getting them to explore the guest room. Nothing worked. It always seemed to disappear in their presence, no matter how long they stayed. As I made a full recovery physically, my sanity worsened. I was sick of living in fear. I was sick of the smell, sick of the noise. I was sick of feeling like a prisoner in my own home. So I did the only thing deemed logical. I bought a gun. This was my solution. If I couldn't get it out of my house, and I couldn't make it sick or kill it any other way, then I'd put a fucking bullet in its head. I made a plan with my fiancé to kill it the day I received my weapon. I strapped a light to my forehead and held my gun out at the ready as she slowly opened the door for me. I met the creature's eyes. As soon as the light entered its realm, its gaze shifted up at me. I think this was the first time I really got a deep look into its emotion. It's strange. I would have thought that the look it'd give me would have been one of a fear or confusion, like an animal gives a person right before their car is about to collide with it in the street. But no, this look was different. This look was cold. It was almost like it was telling me that this was its territory and that any intruder would be moved by force. Despite the fact that I had the gun, I was the one who was afraid. I was the confused animal trying to understand the force coming at me. I remember unloading the entire clip into the thing. To my joy, it didn't even attempt at making that awful scream as I kept firing, letting all of the anger from the past month leave my body with the bullets. As soon as I was out, I remember I stood there, taking in the deepest breaths I have ever taken. It was dead, I thought. A large smile formed on my face, and just as I was about to spin around and give my wife the biggest congratulatory kiss, I heard it start coughing. It heaved, and to my utter horror, I could see the bullets start to leave its body. They started to drop out of it, almost like sweat, leaving behind a disgusting yellow pus that coalesced against the wound. My eyes grew large, and I immediately spun around, dropping my gun, and closed the door behind me. Realizing my mistake, I told my fiancé to run while I went back to grab my weapon. I quickly opened the door to retrieve my gun, and right in my face was the creature, now standing on long, thin legs. I screamed and grabbed the gun, ducking out of the way just as it reached out to grab me. I locked the door behind me once more and fell to the ground once I was safe. I fell to my knees and I cried. The emotion came rushing out of me. I sat there for a pretty solid amount of time, bawling my eyes out. In my mind, there was only one thing to do. The next day, my wife and I bought all of the materials we could, and we sealed the room back up. Then, we called our real estate agent and told her we'd like to sell the house. I know some of you are going to scream at me for that. Why didn't you burn the place down? Why didn't you fill that room with concrete? Why didn't you tear down the property and build from scratch? Simply put, I don't want that thing to get out. If it's content to hang out in that room for all of eternity and bite the heads off of rats, that's perfectly fine with me. Honestly, it's a much more comforting thought than it being out walking the streets of God knows where, terrorizing God knows how many people. I can't imagine the horrors it could unleash if it let loose. Obviously, we can't tell the next buyers about the creature, otherwise we'd never sell the place, but what they don't know won't hurt them. We tried sound and smell proofing the area as best we could so that it takes longer for someone to notice, but for the time being, I think we're fine. We've already picked out a new place to live in a new city, so we'll be far gone from this place soon. Honestly, there isn't much to say about this. I'm obviously never coming back here. I think my only piece of advice is that if any of you are looking to buy a house, make sure that you check every room thoroughly, even the ones that seem to be hiding something dark. What's lurking in the dark might make you rethink your purchase entirely.